How you doing? So it feels like I gotta finish the story. So I'm gonna. I left Glacier National Park after having talked with my dad and after having had kind of a beautiful, a beautiful experience. Um, I left relatively recharged, and and I remember blowing through the Fish Lake area, I think it's called, up by the Panhandle of Idaho. I think that's what that's called. I'm not sure. Anyway, it was kind of a beautiful area, sort of like Aspen or Park City, but young. And I camped just inside Washington. And I tried really hard, but I could not find a place that was not a campground. So I did camp in a campground. I don't remember how much they charged me, but they did charge me something. And I remember leaving and going the rest of the way to Seattle, which took me through Spokane. And I remember the town of Leavenworth, I think that's what it's called. Um, and it's a town that looks a lot like a Swiss Alpine kind of place. I traveled through that area worried about money. Yeah, I was very, very worried about money at that point. And right around Spokane, I think, the highway turned from a 2-lane into a major 4-lane highway. It did bottleneck through what I think the town, like I say, is called Leavenworth. I'm not positive what the town is called. Through the mountains. And then as soon as you kind of got into the Seattle sprawl, it went into full highway mode, city highway kinds of stuff, which I hated big time. And that night, it was a long day, first of all, and that evening, I was somebody who didn't have money, and now I was in a city, and so I was really worried about where I was going to be able to camp. And I remember going into a residential section, not very far off the highway, and looking for open fields. It shames me in a way. But there was nothing to be done. I went up to a door next to a vacant lot, and I knocked on the door, and a woman came to the door, and I asked her if I might camp in the vacant lot beside her house, and she looked very alarmed and said, "No, no, 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 you can't do that." So I then followed this kind of road. This was kind of on the outskirts of Seattle. I followed this road out of deep suburbia and kind of on the edge of how far civilization had crept. And I found a bridge, and I slept under the bridge. The next day, I went into Seattle, and I went to a what was it called? When somebody wires you money, you can pick it up at this service. It was not a bank. Again, I've forgotten the name of it as well. But anyway, and I picked up, I think that it was $600, I think. And that was literally the exact cost. Maybe it was just a touch more, but it was really close to the exact cost of a boat ticket on what they call the Inland Passage that goes from Seattle up to Haines and takes 3 days. I can't remember whether I bought my ticket that day or whether I had to wait until tomorrow, but I know that I had to wait until tomorrow. So I did, in fact, wait until tomorrow, but I'm not sure whether I bought the boat ticket that day or didn't. But I had one more night that I had to stay in town. And so I was in the city, in the deep part of the city, downtown, doing all of this, getting money and so on and so forth. And so I went back out to the bridge and slept again under this bridge. Jesus Christ. You know, some of this stuff I am kind of, I carry a bit of shame with me, but, Anyway, the next day, I once again rode into Seattle, and I did something very cool. I boarded a boat with my motorcycle and put the motorcycle down in the hold of this boat and climbed up onto the top deck. And the top deck is called a solarium, okay? And it's called a solarium because it's a big flat deck, really wide as the whole boat, and kind of the ass end of the boat, but up as high as you could get on the boat. And it was a wooden floor, done beautifully, I remember, and about 12 feet up, there was glass over much of it, and right below the glass, there were these heat lamps. And sprawled out on the deck were all of these hippies that were hitchhiking to Alaska. And they had their sleeping gear just right out in the middle of nothing, just okay, why not? So that's what I did. I claimed a little piece under the solarium, and for the next 2 nights, 3 days, I rode that boat up to Haines, Alaska. It was really quite wonderful, really quite wonderful. The whole tenor of my trip changed completely. Here I am riding a boat through this most gorgeous scenery you've ever seen in your life. Holy smokes. There was one sort of overarching thing over the whole thing, and that was I had practically no money. Like, I was guarding the last little bit of money I had because I knew that I had to put all of it into the gas tank. So we got into Haines, and there was another motorcyclist. I remember he was on a Harley, and and he says, let's kind of ride together a little bit. So we did ride together a little bit on the way up. Um, Basically, you go from Haines, get off the boat, and you probably ride a mile and a half to the border of Canada. All right. And the border of Canada is well below sort of Maine, Alaska. You are down in the peninsula of Alaska at that point. And you ride back into Canada for a good long piece and then connect with the end of the Alcan, which takes you all the way up almost to the Arctic Circle before you start heading west again into kind of the middle of Alaska. Not quite the middle, but higher than the edge, that's for sure. You're a long way away from the ocean at that point. And then you connect into Alaska and you begin heading down to Anchorage. Now, Anchorage is a lot like Haines in that it's right on the ocean. All right. So I had a lot going for me at that point. I had I was deeply driven to make it the rest of the way. I was using energy reserves that I don't know where I pulled it from. I was running on fumes in pretty much every sense you can imagine. I was buoyed by some of the most grand and beautiful scenery. Grand and beautiful. The sun. I had been on the boat during the longest day of the year, so the sun was it was going down, but it was going down for like 3 hours or something like that. So that meant that I could ride for hours and hours and hours and really tuck into a campsite at 9 o'clock at night and still have light. And that's exactly what I did. I took the next 3 days, which is kind of an astounding number of miles, actually. And I finished up the trip. The trip goes from, it begins in a place that feels very mated to the ocean. It feels very coupled with the ocean, into an area that feels more like tundra. I mean, honestly, with mountain range after mountain range, we just kept either go almost the entire way. You're basically just going up the valley of these big mountain ranges. Over the top and into Alaska, I remember the gas stations were few and far between. They have got them set up so that I could just about make it into each gas station running on fumes. I remember at the very end of the trip, I remember feeling that I was getting closer to the ocean again. The big, wide valleys began to have tidal rivers in them, or rivers that felt like they were emptying, big, silty, vast plains. Yeah. And then at the end, I woke up on a beautiful morning, probably had, I'm going to say about 40 miles, give or take, that I needed to go. I remember the bike was running terribly at that point. The bike would only do about 45 miles an hour wide open. And I didn't have the skill set to be able to fix that. I remember pulling into a high school, the high school parking lot. And across from the high school parking lot was a payphone. And I remember calling my cousin Tom. So I stayed that summer with my, I want to call him my stepdad, but he was my Uncle Larry. And my Uncle Larry has a boy, Tom. And I remember calling Tom on the phone. And he says, "Oh, I know just where you are." And I remember him parking across the parking lot, looking around for me. And I remember riding across. I remember riding across the parking lot and giving my cousin a hug. And that was the end of the journey. That was the end of that journey. It wasn't the end. It wasn't the end of the craziness and the beauty that I saw that summer, but it was the end of the journey. And that journey has stayed with me all of this time. In a few days, I'm going to be 60. I did that when I was 18. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take it easy. Bye-bye.